I'm Mike Govoni, and for the last 15 years, I've been in recovery from addiction and on the deepest quest to find healing, to experience my own unique wholeness beyond the story of what happened to me. By taking an integrative, holistic approach to experience transformation, I bring you the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast, a show dedicated to people in recovery who are looking for deeper healing and transformation. Hey guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. I've been anticipating this conversation after good friend and host of the Stress Elimination Summit, Tim Ringgold, connected me with today's guest, Jesse Harless. Jesse and I will be sharing the virtual stage on the Stress Elimination Summit together, which will be really exciting. I want to take a moment to personally invite you to the event, and it's totally free to join. Myself, today's guest Jesse, and 25 plus other leaders in the field of addiction, recovery, wellness, biohacking, right? The father of biohacking, Dave Asprey, will be speaking. And we've all come together to support specifically the recovery community, to share our knowledge, our expertise, to help you learn how to reduce stress, how to heal from trauma, how to become more self-aware and to relate to your stress and anxiety in a new way, how to create better self-esteem, and much more. Also, I want to let you know what's very important is stress is the leading cause of relapse. So if there's one prevention topic to cover, it's definitely how to eliminate, or maybe a better word we may use is to regulate your stress. You can join, and once again, it's totally free by clicking the link in my bio on my Instagram page at Mike Govoni, or by clicking the Stress Elimination Summit in the show notes. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Jesse Harless. Jesse is a leader in the addiction recovery and mental health space. He is the author of the best-selling book, Smash Your Comfort Zone with Cold Showers, and the CEO of Entrepreneurs in Recovery. He holds events which are highly experiential, online, in-person events to help individuals and organizations discover their inherent ability to develop coherence, increase resilience, harness strengths, amplify appreciation, and create purposeful visions. Jesse's next book that we actually talk about on this episode is called If Not You, Then Who? That will be released on February 22nd, 2021. Jesse holds a MA in clinical mental health counseling from River University, and he is a Heart Math certified trainer as well as an exchange faculty member. So without further ado, Jesse, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me on. It's super great to be here. Thank you.
And as another handsome bald guy, it's really nice to connect with another brother with no hair, because no hair is the new thing. So it's nice to connect with another brother. And in fact, you introduced me as I was introduced to you by another gentleman, Tim, who's running the summit we're both on, and Tim's another bald guy. So it's like this trio of bald men, and it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. When it starts to go, it starts to go. You just got to shave it off, and now we're all together doing the same thing.
Yeah, and it's difficult to part with it too. Like when I started going bald, like 18, I would see it in the sink kind of falling out, and I was like, oh man, my hair's falling out. And eventually I had a buddy who I worked with, and he's like, man, you got to shave that thing. And I was like, oh no, like I can't do it. And yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, that's what happened. My barber actually said to me, that's when you really know. You know he's going to lose money. And he's like, hey, you need to shave this. And I never saw him again.
That's funny, because my barber would always tell me, oh, no, you look good. And he would just fade up like the back of it, and I was like, okay.
I didn't want to let go.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive right in, man. I am really excited to have this conversation with you, and more importantly, I'm excited to get to know you, to call you a friend at this time, to connect with like-minded brothers in the recovery community who are on their path of growth, of transformation, of healing. I'm really excited to have this chat, and let's start by just sharing with the audience a little bit about your experience and what it was like for you out there in active addiction, and what transpired in the turning point for you to get sober.
Okay. Yeah. Active addiction, if we want to call it active addiction, I guess my first active addiction was was a behavioral addiction. You know, I got addicted to internet pornography at 11 and 12. And that was kind of the first addiction that led to consequences, serious consequences, as far as like my social relationships, my relationships with family, my relationships with just friends and peers and women. It affected my whole life around me. And it was more of something I was hiding. And, you know, that kind of led into high school years being very difficult. And so that was kind of the first active addiction, was the behavioral addiction. And then, you know, eventually when I went to college is when I discovered, you know, everything, you know, drugs, lots of alcohol. And, you know, it was just when people were going to bed to study, I wasn't going to bed. You know, people went to bed. I'm like, hey, let's keep partying. And there was just something there that just wanted to chase that happiness. It just didn't want to end. Like I just wanted to keep it going. And, you know, and then I flunked out of school, and obviously I'm skipping a lot of jackpots that happened, but you know, eventually, just to get right to it, you know, my father was someone who was an alcoholic, and he was addicted to cocaine, and he's someone who left it when I was 4 due to his alcoholism, and he was in a bad car accident and had brain damage. So he, from 4 to 20, we only talked 3 times, and when I talked to him, he wasn't all there. So there was like trauma there, and so when he passed away at 20, it was kind of like I was in this place of brokenness anyway. My spirit was broken. I felt down and out, and I was hanging around with people that it was only a matter of time for some type of major catalyst to happen for me to just go off the deep end. And that's what it was. When he passed away, I went off the deep end, really get into opioids, really get into cocaine. And for the next few years, I chased that really hard. And that led to a major charge, being arrested by federal agents. And when that happened, that kind of changed everything. As far as I had a choice, it was a crossroads. It was like, do the next right thing every day, or you will serve your 20s in federal prison. And it was a pretty clear choice for me. I was like, okay. It was kind of like I woke up. You know, it's kind of like, whoa, where have I been? I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on. And I just started to listen and become willing. So that was the start of the journey. So that was the active addiction part. In 22, I got into recovery, and I've been in recovery for the last 15 years.
Yeah, beautiful story, man. I can relate to so much. I know as we chatted before this, you know, I had the similar situation of you know, being separated from my mom at 3, you with your dad at 4, and those are those original incidences that really, you know, stick to our core and really cause a lot of pain. And I'm glad you got what you needed to kind of wake up a little bit. You know, having a federal sentence or a felony is a big deal, and that can really snap you out. So it's often the pain that gets us to, you know, come to the aha moment, and whatever it takes is whatever it takes. And you know, it's got you on your path today. And more importantly, as we veer off from, maybe you'd say, you know, a drunkalog or something like that, I'm really interested in your work that you do now. I know you have a company, Entrepreneurs in Recovery, and so forth. And even maybe before we dive into that, did you get sober in a 12-step fellowship, or how'd you get sober?
So the court, when I was arrested, they gave me a prescription, and there was no drug courts at the time. Around here in New Hampshire. So the prescription was this: you're going to work full time, you're going to go to meetings, you're going to get this paper signed, and you're not going to drink or use drugs. And that's what they told me directly. And I said, okay. So I had to go to meetings. I was, you know, court ordered to meetings. So yes, I started with going to AA and some NA, but it really, I found a lot of people in recovery through those fellowships. And so, yeah, that's where it started. And, but I was also really blessed. I had a therapist, a drug and alcohol therapist named Bonnie, who actually shaped and changed my future because of her level of compassion. I ended up becoming a clinical mental health counselor because of her later on. But so that therapist, I ended up having a mentor, a really powerful mentor. So all at the same time. I mean, I had the mentor before I found the meetings. I had the mentor and the therapist before the meetings. So I had these 2 really powerful figures in my life. And then I also had this 12-step fellowship I had to go to. So it really kept me in a bubble, and I was working full time, and just everything kept me really in this like determined bubble to just stay and doing the next right thing. And plus I was facing that prison time. They wanted to put me away. So I had that hanging over my head. So every day I just really went deep, went into my heart, went into a higher power, a power greater than myself, to just be like, all right, how can I do this? And that's what I did.
Yeah. Beautiful. And the mentor and therapist is key, right? It's like, sponsorship is really helpful, but really working out some of that stuff in therapy, and obviously having someone to support you in the process as a mentor is vital. So I'm always, sharing with others how important mentorship is, coaching is, therapy is, right? Like getting sober is just the first step. Putting down drugs and alcohol is just the first step. As my big emphasis is trauma, is the root of addiction, and trauma happens because of lack of support. And when we get into, 12-step or whatever path of recovery we choose, getting some sort of support is vital, right? Beyond just the recovery support, you were getting mentorship, you were having a therapeutic relationship with this woman, Bonnie. So that's really, really, fascinating. And I'm just curious too, like, what's your take on AA now? You still in AA, or what are you doing now for your recovery?
Well, so what happened was, 2020 disrupted a lot of stuff, right? So, I had a group I was going to. It was my home group. It was just a group I went to. It was really the one meeting I went to and a week, and that got shut down with 2020. It didn't go digital to Zoom. And so I started to just kind of, I ended up, before COVID hit in February, I went to Costa Rica. And I had this really powerful experience in Costa Rica, and I had a whole bunch of experiences right before the pandemic. And then, and then the pandemic came and kind of changed the landscape of these fellowships in a lot of ways, and brought them from the in-person to the online. And I'm already online all day. It's my business, is being online and facilitating. And I literally facilitate in the addiction recovery mental health space. So I work with a few men, I coach people, so I'm really involved in this kind of movement and transformation. And so like, I would just say that, the fellowship was such a huge part of my growth and journey. And today I still get asked to speak and come into that fellowship. And yes, I do that. But I don't regularly attend like I did. It's not that I'm like, oh, he's on the outside and he's going to fall off the edge and get bitten off. It's like, not at all. I mean, it's just at a place where I have such a strong recovery team. I have such strong support around me. It's all based in recovery. And that's what my new book is about. It's literally talking about this journey about, think about what happened to me my first week of recovery. I had a therapist and I was talking about trauma right in my first week. So I had this really solid foundation that I still rely on today. And that gets missed a lot just by going to 12-step fellowships and stuff. You don't get to the core trauma. You don't get to the core wounds, but you obviously get an amazing connection, which is so critical, is that connection. You also get, a sort of a house cleaning too, of course. But to get to the deeper levels, that's what I became really interested in because of what happened to me. And I would see the people around me and they were living from the wounded self. And I'm a wounded healer like you are, but still living around that, and then having food addiction and other addictions to cope. And so that's just something I've seen. And so to me, I like an integrative recovery, like yourself. It's integrating all of these things. And when I became an entrepreneur, it only became that just became increased because I learned from even more mentors. And many of these mentors are in long-term recovery. They just have different pathways, and learning all the different pathways and making a holistic journey.
Yeah, man, that's great. You're definitely speaking my language, and it's really refreshing to meet other people on the path that are integrating these other therapies, practices, modalities to experience what I call healing beyond recovery. So as we've chatted even before this, I think we're birthing a new consciousness amongst the recovery community. And there's, AA is very helpful, and these other paths to recovery are great. But as Gabor Mate says, a leader in the field of trauma and addiction, he says, the cure to addiction is consciousness, right? Consciousness is freedom. So we've talked about this a little bit before, about being awake, about being mindful, about cultivating the practices to support that. So maybe we can just dive into your little personal journey, and maybe you can reflect and integrate what your book is about as you share about your own personal journey on what did you do? How did you integrate? What did you integrate? What are these other steps to holistic or integrative recovery that you're talking about and that you've written about?
Yeah, and I just want to point out that right now, it's where I live, it's 1222 on 122 2021. And so I don't care if you follow numbers or not, but 1222 and on 122 of 2021. Pretty amazing.
Wait, so hold on. I haven't asked you this, but do you have a thing with numbers and synchronicity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So that one of the things when I had my dark night of the soul, I was waking up at, like, I shit you not, 222, 333, 444, 555, and I was seeing these number sequences, and there's more to that which we can get in later. But I hear you, man. This is the awakening. A spirit speaks to us through number sequences, and the other it speaks to me through birds.
Yes. And some people might listen to this like, oh, I don't believe in that. That's sacrilegious. No, it's every religion. Trust me. I've dove into plenty, and it happens to us all. We see 1111, we see 122, we see 222, we see it on license plates, we see an eagle when we need to see it, we see a hawk. I mean, so it's all there. It's just whenever you choose, it's your choice. When you want to start to see it, it's there. And so I've been able to really I've been journaling for the last 15 years every day. And so when you start to do that, you just start to see, it's not just the journaling, it's the awakening. It's the awakening that, like you said, consciousness, but also when you write it down, you have evidence. I don't got to go online and Google a peer-reviewed paper by some doctors. I have the evidence in my journal. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I felt it. So I just wanted to share that because that was definitely a synchronicity. So what was it? I don't even know what the question was, because when that happened, I went into that.
Yeah, so we got into the thread of talking about holistic recovery. You got into saying you've written a new book, and I wanted you to share with the audience, what does holistic recovery or integrative recovery mean to you, and what have you had to integrate, right? Some different practices, modalities, therapies. And what have you written about as it relates to needing to take a holistic, integrative approach to recovery?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I mean, it's everything today. I mean, that's everything. I can't stay where I was 10 years ago. There's a saying I heard, and when I was in the halls, is you can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. So it's just, I have to keep growing. I have to keep going. And I think that's what we're meant to do as human beings. And so in the beginning, what I was doing worked, and then it didn't work. I had to continue to evolve because there was still deeper trauma. There was still deeper issues I wasn't getting to. The inner child wasn't healed. The inner child was being ignored. And as I integrated, I went to school for clinical mental health counseling, and I really thought that was my path. I thought that's what I was going to do. And then I realized when I started being a therapist, and I was in a drug court, and I had 8 clients in a drug court. And you want to talk about the most difficult situations I've ever seen. Just be a therapist in a drug court. I mean, some of these gentlemen and women are homeless. They're in homeless shelters where people are shooting up in the bathroom, but they're still coming every day to the drug court for 6 to 8 hours a day, 18 months of it. So I'm always blown away when people graduate from the drug court. I mean, you guys are amazing. I was a therapist in a drug court, and 3 people overdosed and died during a 6 to 8 month period. I mean, it just showed me that therapy is very important, but I need to be who I truly am, which is like a facilitator. I'm like a coach, a facilitator. I want to help them get from here to then get to out of the drug court and then start a business and then follow their heart. Like that, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So after, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of being a therapist, I said, you know what, I'm going to head towards the coaching path. But I also worked at Verizon, and I was moving up in the company at Verizon. So I had this full-time job at Verizon. I was doing the full-time internship for a college and for my master's. And I'm like, okay. And the money at Verizon was really good. So I'm like, oh, what do I do here? And so what I end up doing is I left everything. I just left it. And I said, I'm going to follow my heart and start Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And that name came to me in a meditation, just like Jack Canfield's book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. When he was in a meditation, that name, Chicken Soup for the Soul, came to him. I had this similar experience with Entrepreneurs in Recovery in a meditation. It just came to me. It was like, what am I? Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, Entrepreneurs in Recovery. Oh, that must be already taken. And it wasn't. I'm like, okay, that's my business. And so then I decided that was going to be a coaching business. I was going to write books. I was going to create an ecosystem for recovery with a website. And what ended up happening is it evolved into my personal journey of healing. I ended up taking a facilitation training, and this facilitation training was a professional training. It was like getting a PhD in facilitation. And I really learned how to bring powerful insight in ways that brought psychological safety to these environments in treatment centers, even to the leaders who are experiencing a massive amount of burnout and overcare. I could facilitate resilience, and I could facilitate change. And so, I mean, I could go on and on, but I mean, these type of trainings kept happening. I took a coach training. I became a certified professional coach. And then I became a detoxification specialist through my mentor, who's a naturopath doctor. And I know you have a similar story, but and then Heart Math, and then I found Heart Math because I facilitated at their global event, and then I became a Heart Math certified trainer. So to me, this journey is a lifelong journey of growth, and it's learning, and you know, who knows what I'll do this year? I might get another certification in something else that's a holistic, homeopathic way of living.
Yeah, beautiful. So it sounds like to me that stepping into your work has not only birthed a purpose for you, but it's also contributed in a huge way to your healing journey. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the great work of one of my mentors, Mastin Kipp. You know, your trauma is a prerequisite to your purpose, right? When we find our purpose, you know, the doors just begin to open, right? We're at a huge shift right now globally where people are no longer sitting in their cubicles, but they're working from home. People, and where I'm going with that is people are realizing now, you know, more than ever before, is that they can actually do something that they want to do, and it's forcing a lot of people to say, okay, let's take the leap. And you took the leap, I took the leap, I've seen many other people take the leap. And I truly believe, like, when you're meant to do this work, like, you were born to do this shit, right? I was born to do this. This is why I am incarnated here, to help other people. My story of suffering, your story of suffering was a gift to us so we could catalyze and be who we are today to help other people. I believe we all have a unique medicine. And how can you fail at what you're born to do? But it's taking the risk, right? Tim Ferriss says most people will settle for certainty than being uncomfortable, more or less, something like that. It's like we're always looking for that certainty. And I just really applaud you for jumping off the cliff there and taking the leap. Now, you had to incorporate your facilitation training, your detox, you know, naturopathic work, your heart math work, which I want to ask you about in a second. So these are the integrative, holistic parts that make up the whole, and moving just from what I think of just of recovery, right? Recovery is just a baseline, to now living your purpose, right? You're shining bright here on your 21-day juice fast, looking amazing. Like, it's like you just keep excelling. Your book on cold showers, like this is that extra work that we can begin to do and integrate. So I wanted to ask you about heart math and the importance of heart rate variability for people that don't know about this. Now, my work with healing trauma, and trauma being at the root, is working at the level of the nervous system, which has everything to do with heart rate variability, which has everything to do with helping the person become regulated. Now, my big thing is like when people say, oh, I want to work on my recovery, I say, okay, what does that mean? What does working on your recovery mean? Does that mean you go to another meeting and write another 4-step or whatever? Maybe. For me, working on my recovery means creating more safety and stability in my own mind body. So what we're recovering from is dysregulation. And when you learn how to regulate, and heart math training is a huge part of that, you see amazing results where drugs and alcohol become vestigial. You don't need them to, give you an upper or a downer or to change how the way you feel. You have that empowerment within. So can you share a little bit about what being a heart math trainer is and what, HRV is?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So just a little bit about the heart math is, heart math, I heard about heart math through a show called Missing Links on Gaia by Greg Braden, who's one of my mentors. And he talked about this heart rate variability. And he talked about how there's in the heart, there's 40,000 sensory neurites in the heart. What that means is the heart can take a memory. And there's actually studies and books on this about a heart transplant moving from one person to another, and that person receives the heart transplant, and the memories of the person are inside their heart, and they start to come to them in dreams. And
I've seen that.
This is documented. Yeah, this is documented stuff. So the heart is not just this beating valve. The heart actually talks to the brain more than the brain talks to the heart, up to 90% more. And why that's important is because we spend our whole lives living from the neck up. We have an opportunity to change our focus into the heart, and it's not hard to do it. You can do it within 60 seconds or less, which is really just starting to breathe a little deeper, and then maybe drawing your attention into your heart, and then thinking of something you appreciate or something you care about, someone you love. And when you start to do that, within even sometimes 60 seconds, you start to change what's called your heart rate variability. So if you're in a frustrated state, if you're in an angry state, if we were to hook you up to, I don't know if it's called an ERG, we were to hook you up to a machine and regulate your heart rate variability, which you can buy devices for $100 and measure this from heart math, you would see that you would have this rigidity. It would be all over the place. The heart rate variability, there'd be no harmony to it. There's no structure, coherence. And so that's what this is all about. It's about getting in this state of appreciation or love or appreciation. And what happens is the heart rate variability starts to create this perfect wave. It creates this perfect coherent sine wave. And when that happens, it changes our health and immunity. It changes our memory, our ability to memorize and have super memory, immunity. It's so powerful and not talked about that. That's what got me so fascinated. Like, how is this not being talked about in 2020? How is this not being talked about during what's happening in our world? And so that's what got me to say, you know what, I have to get certified in this, and I need to, there's over 400 studies about this in the heart. So I'm like, okay, let me really go deeper on this. And so, we experience it all the time. We're experiencing it right now on this call. We are experiencing group coherence together. And it's something that is not talked about, but it is something that is happening all the time. And like you talked about self-regulation, well, so they, in the heart math world, they say that the inability to self-regulate is the central health and relational issue that plague teams in social problems at scale. That is it. It's like the inability to self-regulate. And so it's the most important strength in many ways, and because if you can self-regulate your emotions, your attitudes, your behaviors, and develop a capacity for resilience, you actually will be able to take on whatever comes your way, but you'll be able to do this from a heart-centered place, a heart-focused place. And I think we all need that. I don't know if there's an exception to that. And so that's what got me so passionate about bringing this to the mental health and addiction recovery space. And there's people who have been doing that, but I just want to see it with millennials and younger generations using and utilizing and recognizing the power of the heart. Why aren't we seeing that on the news? Why aren't we seeing that in the papers about how do we self-regulate ourselves with heart-brain harmony? And so that's really what I'm passionate about.
Well, Jesse, if everyone started to learn this, then the pharmaceutical industry would probably take a big hit, because the benzos and Valiums and Klonopins and alike would be not needed as much as they are today. So I imagine that may be a fact, but yes, what you're sharing is really powerful. And the self-regulation is key in beginning to unify the mind and body connection, so you can actually empower yourself, or the listeners can empower themselves with more of that space between the stimulus and response of what's here, right? And to come from that heart center, right? And I never knew that this was possible until I faced irritable bowel disease and began to practice meditation, and then begin to study like you under a naturopathic doctor, and begin to understand, wow, there's a huge correlation between conscious awareness and self-regulation, immunity, right? And overall health. So it's beautiful what you're bringing to the world with being a heart math trainer. And for people that don't know about heart math, there's the Heart Math Institute, I think you referred to. They have a big website. I actually have a device here, right to the right of me. It's a heart math device. You put your thumb on it, and it has like this light thing that goes up and down. And as you begin to synchronize your breath and breathe, it will kind of go up in a certain way. You want to match this rhythm, and it syncs you up.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. So that measures heart rate variability. They're called Inner Balance is one of the names for those devices. And Inner Balance is it's that device. It's about $100, and it syncs right into Bluetooth, or you can plug it into your phone, and you can actually measure. So you could be meditating, or you could be with your children or with your dog or walking in nature, and take this device with you and actually see it in real time, the heart-brain harmony happening. And then you have that proof again. I'm always going to go back to that proof. We can't prove everything, right? But we can have our experiences that we can see for ourselves, that this is really happening when I'm meditating. This is really happening when I'm practicing mindfulness, or if I'm in an opportunity where I have a lot of care. You can see it. And I love that. And so, you do that for long enough and track it, you go, okay, how can I help others now? It's like, I see it for myself, and I want to give this away. But yeah, I'm glad you have that device. I have a couple of those too.
Yeah. Super cool. So they're super cool. Another one I have is a TENS machine that I hook up to my ear, and I do vagal nerve stimulation. That may be another topic for another day, but because of trauma, I was born actually premature. The study on premature babies, right? Their vagal tone isn't as strong as babies that have come to full term. And I think a lot of people in recovery are suffering, from the inability to regulate because their vagal tone is down. So when we can increase that vagal tone, which I do every morning, I put the TENS machine on my ear, I send a pulse through my ear, it goes down, into my vagus. And sometimes, because we know the vagus goes down into all the organ systems, including subdiaphragm into the GI tract, because sometimes I'll put the TENS machine on, and in 2 minutes, like I have to use the bathroom because it's getting my colon going. But this is the training we need to do in order to heal from the original incident, or let's say the original wound, which is the trauma, which we went and talked about earlier on. Is these are practices that empower you with tools, with greater resilience, with greater resourcing. So I think it's awesome that you have your head in this science, and that's why I jive with you. I think it's beautiful. And I want to shift gears a moment, because when we kind of had a meet and greet, we were talking, and you were like, because I'm an empath and da 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 da. I was like, oh, hold on, and all this big topic about being an empath came up, and I said, wow, Jesse, I said, it's funny you say that, because I put a quote out there on my Instagram page that I believe we're all empaths in recovery. Now, I might be, overstating that, but I haven't met someone that didn't have some sort of empathetic quality who's in recovery. And what I mean by that is being, ultra sensitive, is being tuned into energies and frequencies, maybe even that they're not aware of, but there's some sort of oversensitivity there. And I can relate. I know you can relate. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because I know your next book, you want to write about being an empath, or correlating empath and recovery and so forth. So let's share your take on being an empath in recovery.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where you ask yourself, hey, what's wrong with me? I don't feel like I'm from this world. I feel separate. I'm not part of this. And when you ask that question enough and you start to tune it into, instead of being a victim, you turn it into, who am I? Instead of it being like a victim, like, who am I? I'm lost. And I was there for a long time in hopeless and in survival mode. But eventually, as I started to self-regulate, I started to ask, like, no, seriously, who am I? Like, why am I so sensitive? Why have I always been such a highly sensitive person? And then guess what? There's actually a whole bunch of books on this topic and documentaries. And I started to watch them and read these books. And I started to realize, like, oh my God, I'm just a highly sensitive person. There's nothing wrong with me. And I've been that way since I can remember. I remember being in middle school and just having this deep compassion for nature and animals and turtles. And I mean, I used to have turtles and snakes and everything in my house at all times. And I had this deep compassion for all this. And I was really blessed. I grew up in the city, but I lived on the state line of a state. I lived on the line of another town which had a state forest that was acres and miles, and I would just go into this forest by myself all the time as a kid. And so I just had this deep connection to nature, deep connection to animals, highly sensitive. And people used to say, "Oh, you're just shy." But what they didn't realize that my brain had already synthesized and had a whole documentary about to share with them, but I didn't share it because I was shy. And it wasn't because I was shy. It was because I was highly sensitive. I was picking up on their energy and it wasn't safe to share with them. I was actually being intuitive. And so that's what I started to realize way later in life, is that I'm actually protecting my energy from energy drainers. A lot of people walk around looking to just drain your energy, and they're ready to dump and unload problems on you, especially if you're an empath. If you're not an empath, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. If you're an empath, I was at Verizon for 14 years, and I worked directly in retail sales for most of that time. And I can tell you, I can't even count. Thousands of people came into my store and said they had a problem with their card charger or their phone. And within 5 minutes, they're telling me about their kid. They're talking about alcoholism. They're telling me about their stress. They're dumping their problems on me. Why? I'm working at a Verizon store. Why is this happening? It's because I was an empath. People felt that energy of safety and empathy, and they would dump on me. And I didn't know how to protect my boundaries at the time. I had to learn that way later on, how to protect my boundaries and set boundaries with family and friends, and whether it's close friends too, setting boundaries because people are drawn towards empaths. And so an empath is someone who, you seem to attract people who want to dump their problems on you. You're easily overstimulated. That's a big one for me. Overstimulated. You can be extremely vulnerable with people at times, and almost too vulnerable. And then you get hurt because that person, they weren't ready to feel deeply about as you did. And then you need that alone time. And that's the biggest key of my breakthrough that I've had, is to know that I need to be alone to recharge my batteries. And that's the key for me, is I can come out and be a facilitator and coach people and do all these things, but I have to come back to home base and I have to recharge myself. And so if any of these are resonating with the audience or resonates with your listeners, you're probably an empath if you've related to what I just said. And so I just want to say that is a strength. And that's when I reframed this. And by the way, I got to tell you, from 2014 and the next 4 years, I read books on shyness, social anxiety. I mean, I'm a clinical mental health counselor. I read books on everything you can imagine. And it literally led me to being an empath. Like, I was like, oh, shyness. Oh, here's affirmations to overcome that. And I was like, but this isn't it. I haven't hit the mark yet. And then eventually I found the Empath Survival Guide and Thriving as an Empath by Dr. Judith Orloff. And when I started reading her work, I go, nailed it. Here it is. I found it. And so I'm a big fan of her work. And so it's been my whole life I've been like this. And when you find something that you have had your whole life and you couldn't put the name to it, and then you find it, it's like a spiritual awakening. And so that's why my next book, I really would love to interview lots. I mean, I've already, like you, I've talked to thousands of people in addiction recovery, and I'm convinced maybe it's 80%, maybe that's high, I don't know. I feel there's a high percentage in addiction recovery like you that are empaths. I'd love to start interviewing these people for the next book and write that book. Yeah.
That's for sure, man. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. That was awesome. I actually had a lot of light bulb moments during your share. I have always been one of those people where someone will just come and just completely dump everything on. And I never knew that maybe a quality of being an empath, but I can identify to that, with that so much. And I think one big takeaway for the listeners maybe is to share what you've learned about how to protect your boundaries as an empath. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know at least a couple clients right now that could benefit from learning how to protect their boundary a little bit more, maybe from your experience. What did you come up with?
It's going to be really difficult. I'm going to tell you that, because we are highly sensitive people, and a lot of us become codependent, and a lot of us become people pleasers as empaths. It's going to be very difficult. I'm going to preface it with that, because you're going to have to tell people that, hey, especially someone who's I have a lot of people in my life. I don't know if anyone can relate. When I call them on the phone, they talk for 17 minutes straight. I might say 3 things. I don't know if anyone has those people in their life, but I have a few of them. And this is where it's going to be very difficult, because you're going to have to tell these people up front, hey, great. Oh, I can't wait to talk to you. I have about 5 minutes before you even get into the conversation. That's one way to subtly set a boundary. When you know this person is probably going to dominate the entire conversation, when I get on a conversation with that person, I will say to them, hey, just to let you know, I got 5 minutes. I'm actually heading to the gym. So I'm so happy to connect. Hey, what's happening? And then they know. And so there's that. And then, there's you can do it with compassion, but you have to have the confrontation, which we don't like. We don't like that. But we have to do that. And so you can just set it up where you just tell people up front, or in a conversation, if maybe they're saying something that, you don't want to share. I had this happen to me, and I'm not going to share the whole thing. It just happened to me, but I had a situation where someone asked me a very personal question. And instead of me setting a boundary and saying, I'd rather not talk about that, I did the people pleasing thing. And I said to them what my belief was around this specific issue, and that they were actually baiting me. And then that led to them expressing their opinion, which I really didn't want to hear about it, because I just want to share what they've asked me and answered their question, but I was being baited. And then that led into me, once again, breathe into my heart. Let me pause before I react to this person. And I totally reframed the whole situation. And that person had massive respect for that. I didn't get baited. I stayed in my heart, and we didn't go there. And we ended up having a great conversation. But so you can do it in real time, and just sometimes you have to have that like compassionate confront. You have to let them know up front, or when it's happening, you just say, you know what, I'd rather just not talk about that, if that's okay. And that's it. And then you move on to the next thing. And that's what I didn't do. And I just had that experience. And, I took a spiritual toll, but I also stayed in my heart. And again, I want to let the listeners know, this is decade of practice. This isn't like overnight. I mean, in the past, that would have happened. It would have affected my whole week, or my whole month, or my whole year. And so now it might only affect 25, 30 minutes as I reflect back on it and do self-regulation practices. So hopefully that was helpful. That's some ideas to set boundaries.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely helpful. And I think just creating some awareness and giving people the terminology and information about being an empath, what an empath is, and then having them make the decision. And a lot of them, from my experience, clients like, oh yeah, I'm an empath, and I'll send them some information about it. And in fact, it allows them to begin to see what's going on here and actually put a name to what they're experiencing and their, oversensitivity, maybe to some degree. Now, I personally think that there's a correlation between, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but trauma and being an empath. I know from my work and my own personal experience that people who experience trauma, we're like threat detecting machines. We're always scanning, and once again, this is subcortical, so it's below consciousness. We're scanning for friend or foe, and it takes being aware of that to really bring the prefrontal cortex to be engaged, to actually have some space between wanting to constantly overcompensate or please someone, or not being able to speak your truth or whatever, because there's a charge that comes with this in the body. As an empath, when you're very sensitive and someone's saying something that you necessarily don't agree with, or you feel like they're intrusive on your boundary, there's a physiological reaction in the body. And a lot of us don't pay attention to that, right? But when we begin to, once you say self-regulate and begin to calm our nervous system, we can get the ventral vagal prefrontal cortex online to engage in a way, right? It's the executive function. We open up to different choices and decisions in that moment. Now, what started that pattern of being so porous in being a people pleaser? Well, maybe it was because of neglect. Maybe it was because, you couldn't speak your truth because your parent or caregiver would say something that would hurt you. I don't know. But these are things that I've seen that are correlated with being an oversensitive person, in the correlation between being an empath and having a history of trauma. So that's just a little bit to share on that. But I think it's really helpful to really share this information with people in the recovery community, because so many of us are so highly sensitive.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you said there, and there's a lot of wisdom behind that, and that's something that I would definitely take into deeper research too about what you just said, and it's really fascinating. I actually made a note of that, because that's something I would definitely explore too, is the link between trauma and empathy and being an empath and being that wounded healer. Hurt people, but healed people help people too, so it's like we are coming from that wounded warrior, that wounded healer place to help others. And it's like, it's such a beautiful thing. We need that. We need more of that. But it's just like, why did that happen? It's like, how do we study that? And I'm really fascinated about what you just said about the trauma link to empathy.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too. Like my mom staying with me, my mom, has suffered from addiction, and I didn't get a chance to live with my mom as a child. And to live with her today up here in Sedona, and see her for who she is, and she's a super, like, she is an empath to the 1,000th degree, right? And she's like, and she said herself, she's like, I'm like an energy rod. I'm like, yeah, because you're an empath, mom. And I think, how am I going to say this? I think like when you've been wounded in great, when you've been wounded greatly, and people have hurt you, it's challenging to trust people, and you become oversensitive, and you constantly are kind of, have your guard up. And to really create that, like, you keep going back to the word safety. It's, as Stephen Porges says in the polyvagal theory, is safety is the medicine. So with us empaths, like, to feel safe is so important, right? And in fact, it's just coming up right now, so I'll share it. Men in relationship and recovery, right? Like chasing the beautiful women in the nice butt or the big boobs or whatever the case may be, right? As a guy, if you're a heterosexual, maybe that's, maybe that's the common thing. I know I did that for years, but I never knew more important than the nice physique and the beauty was to be safe. was to have a partner that I felt safe with. And I'm beginning to share that with some of my men clients, because even in dating, right, us men can be so gravitate towards the looks. And of course, physical attraction is probably very important. But like, to feel safe when you're an empath or a traumatized victim is the number one thing. So I feel you, man, with all your thousands of Verizon customers coming to dump their stuff on you. Man, that must have been so difficult, because you can't get away. You're like, that's what you're there to do, to help them with, chargers and packages and plans. But then again, it comes to like you being so exposed to them just saying, here's all my shit.
Well, what I've learned is some of the best salespeople in the entire world are actually highly sensitive people, empaths, AKA introverts. And so I was actually one of the most award-winning reps and my area. So all that time spending with them, think about it, correlate that. Like, if I'm listening to all this other stuff, they're going to listen to me about the phone and about the tablet and about the plan, and right. So I wasn't doing that to manipulate. It's just naturally who I've been. And so it led to a massive success at Verizon in the sales world. So it's really interesting. That's what I'm saying. It's a strength. It led to a lot of financial success. So it's a really ironic, but that's the beauty of it. And like you said, to feel safe is everything. And that's really, as a facilitator, that's what I do is I facilitate to large scale groups, 100, 150 in a Zoom room or in person at a time. And, how do you build safety with 100 people on a Zoom call? And it's possible. And I do it all the time. And I'm able to do it because there's a certain way to build that safety. But if I never get to that safety, I actually will create an environment that they're already living in, that they're already existing in. So I want to create an environment that they can actually feel safe enough to share their story in a way that they've never shared it before. And that's really what I'm so passionate about, is just what you said. And again, it's because of my life experiences, right? If I wasn't an empath, if I didn't have addiction history and trauma, maybe safety wouldn't be such a number one topic for me. But it really is, being, like I mentioned a few times, a wounded healer.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, man. And going back to what you said about, people opening up and sharing with you at the Verizon store, right? And then them, and then you selling them things, and having a really high success rate. I just thought about, like, when people remember you not because what you said, right, but by how you make them feel. And if you can listen to someone, people know when they're being heard, when they're being listened to. And as a salesman, if you just listen to them and you create that trust without even like trying, but just holding that container for them, then you've already been building a rapport of safety and trust. And then on the back end, when it comes to you suggesting this and that, I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to buy from you. I would want to buy from you if I felt safe, right? Like Joe Polish says, he says, people love to be sold to when you have what they need. And you can create that safety with them. So it's epic. And I think this is a huge part. That's probably a whole other topic me and you could riff on for an hour. But let's get into a little bit of, as we wind down here, I want to ask you, before we get into your new book, I want to know what is the practice or modality or therapy that has brought you the most healing in your recovery, and why?
Ooh. Man, that's a good question. The most healing. Wow. It's hard to say. I mean, like I said, my experience was working with Bonnie, the drug and alcohol counselor, in the really beginning was so foundational, because I would dump stuff on her that I never spoke about with anyone. And I wouldn't even share that with people in the 12-step fellowship. Like, I was just sharing that with her. I was going really deep. And I think that client, relationship, client-patient relationship, where there was so much safety with her and she was so safe to share with, I was able to share a lot. So maybe it was that that talk therapy, that able to just someone to hold space and really just, she didn't have to say anything. She could just head nod and I would just go for the next 20 minutes and it was really powerful. So I think some type of like that in the beginning, it was like just unloading on all this stuff from childhood and teenage years and early adulthood. And then eventually, like, you know, it's, if you ask me, like in the last 2 years, I mean, I gotta say it's been nourishment and nutrition. I mean, that's been the biggest thing, nutrition and nourishment. I mean, when I started to take cold showers and then find a plant-based diet and then start to do juicing and start to do all these things, I started to heal intracellular trauma like no one's business. Like I am not the same person I was a year ago, nor is anyone, because our body is always going through this process of cells dying off and being reborn. But that's what I think the biggest thing is nourishment of the body and what you're putting in, what you're putting into, what are you eating, what are you drinking, what are you putting on your skin, how are you thinking and how are you feeling? That type of thing in the last 2 years has really taken me to pop out of my shell and become a speaker and become a facilitator with confidence. And so that's really what it was for me, is really, it's the one thing that people really don't want to look at, but it's the one thing that can change it all. Is what am I consuming on a daily basis? And I'm talking about caffeine. I'm talking about alcohol. I'm talking about what are you putting in? And is what's the payoff? And so, and so that's really what I started to get into, is the body and really honoring the body. And when I started to do that, it started to help me mentally. It started to help me spiritually, physically, emotionally. And I think we all kind of know that at some level, but when you actually experience it, you actually document it, it's very, very powerful. And that has led to me, like, as you know, I became a detoxification specialist to really learn about the adrenal glands and to learn about the thyroid and to learn about all these endocrine glands that have such a big say in your well-being, even releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine and really important things that are in your gut. It's not in our head, my folks. It's in our gut. You know, serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine. And so when I started to correlate these things together and really practice them, I mean, I can just say it's only getting better. You know, I'm only feeling better. When I say better, I mean happier. I'm happier than I've ever been. And it's only in the last few years when I really took a hard look at nutrition and nourishment.
Well, if you make 90% of your neurotransmitter serotonin in your gut, and your gut is the, you know, ecosystem that's processing and breaking down food and assimilation, it only makes sense that unless you get that thing under control and begin to be very selective of what you put in that, right? So it's not even what we eat, it's what we digest. And those little microbiota there, those little bugs there are so important. So yeah, you hit it right on, you know, the nail on the head there, Jesse, with I'm a huge component. I had to heal from irritable bowel disease, and what you put in your body is so important. Now, I know you have a new book coming out. What's the title of your new book? And let's share a little bit about what it's about and where the listeners can find it.
So the new book is called If Not You, Then Who? And it's really about my story of addiction and of, you know, original wound, the trauma, the story of addiction, the rest, right into finding recovery, everything that happened in those first month, first year, first 3 years of recovery, all the way up in today being an entrepreneur in recovery. I'm literally laying out the whole story. And in the book has a recovery framework, a recovery toolkit, and I call it FEARS. And FEARS is, you know, I'm someone who likes to run towards their fear because I did the opposite my entire life. So I really want to run towards my fear. So I created this acronym FEARS. And did you work on your fears today? And FEARS is focus on your recovery, elevate your recovery, appreciate your recovery, resilience in recovery, and self-care in recovery. And inside of those components are actions. And so this book is a book of story, which I think every person can agree in mental health and addiction recovery. Our story matters. It's the critical component to healing. And so sharing that story, getting to that story, sharing it with others, we start to learn like, wow, there's more to this. Like there's a purpose for my life. So it starts with the story and it ends with the recovery toolkit. And so the majority of the book is this recovery toolkit. And so if not you, then who will come out next month on February 22nd. If you want to pick up a copy and share it with someone who might need to hear the message inside. I have a couple stories from people who have worked with me in addiction recovery in the book. So I'm really excited about it, Mike.
Beautiful. Me too. I can't wait to read it. And I'll update the show notes with the link of maybe Amazon or wherever you can purchase it when it does come out. So in case for the listeners that listen to this down the road. And as we wind down this wonderful conversation, Jesse, where can people find you, find your services, and maybe connect with you?
Yeah, if you want to work with me personally, go to jesseharless.com and you can check me out and get a feel for who I am. And if you want to work with me with facilitation and bring me into your organization, go to recoveryfacilitation.com.
Jesse, it was a pleasure to speak with you today. And I want to just say, I appreciate everything you've had to go through to get you to where you are today. Thank you for being so transparent, and thank you for speaking from the heart. And I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mike, I had a blast. Thank you.
All right, brother, be well. I want to thank you for listening to today's show. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more episodes like this, please be sure to subscribe to the show and drop a comment if you feel called to do so. Also, if you'd like to be the first to know when new episodes are released, receive valuable information about recovery, wellness, consciousness, and more, I invite you to sign up to my email list. When you do so, you'll receive my 19-page holistic recovery guide sharing about topics such as trauma, addiction, nutrition, work-life purpose, recovery, spirituality, and more. I'm passionate about showing and teaching the recovery community about the importance of taking a holistic, integrative approach to your life and recovery, and it's my pleasure to share this with you. You can sign up by clicking the free Holistic Recovery Guide link in the show notes, or by going over to my Instagram page and clicking the link in my bio. I want you to be sure to tune into next week's show with licensed clinical social worker and conscious relationship coach Cassandra Solano. We take a deep dive into what it means to have a conscious relationship and the work that's necessary for you to do, especially if you have a history of trauma, so you can have a healthy, thriving, happy, conscious relationship in your recovery. I look forward to sharing that episode with you, so stay tuned. And remember, you can heal no matter what your story may be. Happy healing, and may you be well.